All right, calling to order Historic Landmarks Commission, September 15th, 2021. Let's begin with a roll call.
All right, thank you, commissioners. This is Mary, and I'll go ahead and start the roll call. I'll start with Chair Grumbine.
Present.
Vice Chair House.
I am here and unmuted.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Gordon is absent. Commissioner Drury.
I'm here.
Commissioner Edmonds.
Here.
Commissioner London.
Here.
Commissioner Mahan.
Here.
Commissioner Manuel.
Here.
And Commissioner Uli, it looks like he's not present, but he did email me that he would be attending. So we have a quorum. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so now let's move on to public comment. Any member of the public wishing to address this commission on something outside of the agenda, we'll have 2 minutes to do so. Please click on the instructions, the green arrow icon, and follow the instructions.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine, and for anyone attending by webinar, please follow the instructions on screen to get oral public comment. While we wait for hands to raise, Ms. Turnovsky, would you receive any written correspondence?
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton and commissioners. We did receive one letter from Richard Boston, and it was distributed to the commission before this meeting. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. And just a quick reminder to everybody on the webinar, if you could mute yourself if you're not speaking. We are getting a pretty good amount of background noise right now. All right, I see one hand raised by Lonnie Evenstein. So Lonnie, I'm going to unmute you. All right, and if you click the microphone icon, you'll have 2 minutes to speak. Please go ahead.
Great, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
great, thank you. Chair Grumbine, members of the commission, thank you for your service to our community. I'm here today to discuss briefly an idea that has become of interest to a number of members of the community, and we hope will become of interest to the City Historic Landmarks Commission. The most significant historic recognition that a landmark can receive in the world is UNESCO World Heritage Site status. Many members of the community believe that the old Santa Barbara Mission area, Mission Historic Park, parts of Mission Canyon involving possibly Rocky Nook Park, the Botanic Garden, and some of the archaeological remains that are there, that this area merits UNESCO World Heritage Site recognition and protection. And that's something that would be a great asset to the city of Santa Barbara. And so I wanted to bring that idea forward to you and encourage your interest and involvement in it. In the coming weeks and months, I anticipate that members of the community will be joining together to draft a proposal for UNESCO with respect to the old Mission area and other adjacent area to it on the basis of natural beauty, architectural importance, geological importance, indigenous importance of Native peoples. Thank you for your consideration. I'll look forward to being in further contact on this important issue.
All right, thank you.
All right, and Chair Grumbine and commissioners, there are no additional hands raised at this time. So back to you for the next item.
All right, thank you. All right, so next following item is approval, item B, approval of the minutes of the Historic Landmarks Commission meeting of September 1st, 2021.
So moved.
All right, motion by Howes, second by Mahan. All right, under discussion, any changes, edits?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Commissioner Mahan.
I have two comments to make on item number 2. The first one is in the motion, number one in the motion, use vertical wood planks at the doors. I recall very clearly when you said that, I added, and also the fences. And you agreed, yes, the fences too. So
Yeah.
we should add the
Yeah, I
fences
remember
to that. And then on item 6, the south elevation windows W208 and W207 shall be a wall that is at least 2 inches by 8 inches. I really think that professionally, we should refer to the wall as a 2 by 8 wall, and drop the inches
Yeah,
item. So it would say something like W2 by 8 and W2 by 7 shall be windows in a 2 by 8 wall for additional shadow reveal.
yep, I agree with all those edits for that. That was exactly what we're trying to say. That sounds good. And any other edits? Comments? All right. So does the maker of the motion and the seconder agree with those edits? Well, the seconder made the edits. So does the maker of the motion?
It's beautiful.
All right. Great. In that case, let's have a roll call vote.
All right, thank you. This is Mary. I'll go ahead and start the roll call vote. I'll start with Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Ludwig,
Yes.
Commissioner Manuel.
Abstain.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Edmonds, I think she might have lost audio. Okay, I'll go ahead and move on to Vice Chair House
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. The motion carries.
Great. Thank you. All right, we're on to item C, approval of the consent calendar of September 15th, 2021.
So moved.
Mr. Hamilton, okay. Commissioner Drury is the motion.
Yes.
Is there a seconder?
Oh, what the heck? I'll second it.
All right, Vice Chair House seconded. And under discussion, Mr. Hamilton. Is there anything to report on it? Mr. Hamilton? Did we lose you?
He's frozen.
Yeah.
Combining commissioners. Yeah, consent agenda was the project at 119 States. So it was a very short meeting.
Great. All right. And so is there any discussion about the
Can you hear me?
consent calendar? Yeah, I can hear you now. You were breaking up a little bit, but we heard you that it was a short meeting. And there was just one item.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
Commissioner Mahan.
I wasn't at the meeting this morning, but because my computer wasn't working, but I did, had to do with the windows, and they were specified to be fiberglass. And I wanted to look at the section to see if it was a traditional section. And so I did see it last Friday down at the Public Works, and it's a very traditional section, looked very much like a wood window. It was dark brown, and you couldn't tell what material it was made out of. So I feel that it is appropriate to El Pueblo Viejo, and I could make the compatibility findings if I had to do that. And I think that Commissioner Manuel did make those findings this morning.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. Any discussion? All right. In that case, let's have a roll call vote for approval of the consent calendar.
All right, thank you. I'll start with Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
I'm going to abstain because I was having computer issues. So I just logged back in and I didn't hear the MP. I will abstain.
all right, no worries, thank you. Commissioner London,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Manuel,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Yeah.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we are on to item D, announcements, requests by applicants for continuances, withdrawals, future agenda items, and appeals. All right.
Mr. Chair,
So, Mr. Hamilton.
I do have one announcement, and it is to introduce our new Community Development Director, Eli Isaacson. So, Mr. Isaacson, if you'd like to come on and just introduce yourself quickly.
Thank you, Ted. Hello, everyone. My name is Eli Isaacson. I am the Community Development Director for the City of Santa Barbara. I have been in this position since the 26th of July, so still very new to the role. I came here from the City of Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I was the Planning and Land Use Director for the City of Santa Fe, which is a very similar role for that city to the role of Community Development Director here in Santa Barbara. In Santa Fe, I had a historic preservation division made up of 5 staff people. We had a historic district review board, which is very similar to the HLC. So while I'm getting to know all of you for the first time, I do have some familiarity with the work and the structure of this organization. So with that, I just would like to say thank you. It's been a very warm welcome thus far, and I look forward to the opportunity to work with all of you more individually in the future.
Great, thank you, Mr. Isaacson. And it's good to see
Welcome.
you.
Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. It's good to see you again. I had a chance with Ms. Nicole. I was like, you're laughing. Mr. Hernandez and I had a chance to give him a little tour of the city, some of the downtown a couple weeks back. And one of the good facts that you'll like to know about him is he's also an architect. He's a licensed architect, or was a licensed architect in other states. But so he's a good guy, we know, right after that. So
It goes without saying, right?
yeah, that's right. And except for the artists in the group who have one more architect, they have to, listen to them comment on buildings. So, yeah, so welcome, Mr. Isaacson, and thank you for the introduction. Is there any questions or anything else you want to say? All right. Well, we look forward to working with you more as you get settled into your job. And yeah.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Hopefully we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right. I
And
see
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Uli on now. Oh.
And Mr. Chair, I do have an
Now it's
additional
on.
announcement, actually.
Oh, yes, Mr. Hamilton.
Just wanted to provide an update on the Lot 3 Paseo project. So the Public Works Director will attend the meeting on the 29th. That's the HLC Full Commission meeting on September 29th to provide a more comprehensive update on what's going on with the Lot 3 Paseo. And I don't have any additional information at this time. Just wanted to let you know. And I believe
Okay, thank you
Ms.
for that
Hernandez had announcements as well.
Hi.
Ms. Hernandez?
Hi, Commissioners. Good afternoon. I did want to remind you, I did email you that the State Historic Preservation Office, in collaboration with the commissioning training nonprofit, is doing free trainings and 4 sets of them this fall. I think it's a great opportunity to get additional training for our commission, and it's required as part of being a CLG to get some training. So I will re-forward that to you. I just wanted to really encourage you all to sign up for one of the sessions, and I'm going to attend probably the October session as well. And I think I'll have 2 more announcements and follow-ups under subcommittee reports.
Great, thank you. All right. Any other announcements, etc.?
Commissioner
All right.
Edmonds raising her hand.
Oh,
Yes,
Commissioner Edmonds, sorry.
I'm having trouble raising and unmuting, I have to leave at 5 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we'll try our best to get you all wrapped up by 5. All right, and any other announcements or anything else? Commissioner Drury, did you have an announcement?
Well, I'll have to leave by 5:55.
Okay, but if we're still around at 5:55, we might have problems considering the size of the agenda.
I'm just feeding my mother quick meals.
Okay, fair enough. 5:55 it is. All right, any other announcements? Oh, no, you're not raising your hand officially. Okay. And then in that case, let's go on to item E, subcommittee report. Any subcommittee report? Ms. Hernandez?
Well, Commissioner Uli and I actually saw each other almost every day for 3 working days. We did receive responses to our RFP for the African American Context Study, and Commissioner Uli's on the advisory committee, subcommittee for that. And he participated in the interview panel, and we've chosen a consultant to work on that, which is Page and Turnbull, a really noted firm. And I think we're going to have a really great product. We now have to go through contracting and council approval, but we should be ready to start the work by October 30th, and it'll be complete next September. So we'll be busy the next year with that. And Commissioner Uli and I and Commissioner Dordan, as part of the subcommittee, designation subcommittee, met and did a walking tour of the boundaries of Bungalow Haven on Monday. And we had one public comment, which I think was emailed to you about that. And I think it really just gave us all an idea of what's what it looks like on the ground and the character defining features of the district, and the proposed expansion of it just a little bit across a few of the streets that didn't make sense to leave out. And maybe when we're going through this, looking at also some sort of signage or ways to make sure if it does get passed, we can really make sure it's appropriately noticed so people know where they are when they're in it and that they're somewhere special. So I thought that was good. Anything you want to add, Commissioner Lee?
No, I think that pretty much touched it. Thank you.
Great. All right, well, we look forward to that discussion of that item. Any other subcommittee reports? All right, in that case, we'll close item E and on to item 1. So this is the Ralph M. Brown Act training and discussion item. So Brown Act training regarding open and public meeting requirements. And I would say that this also was the topic was brought up in particular to a discussion we had at one point with Commissioner Lenvick raised in terms of how much are the ways in which to communicate within commissioners and what we can and can't talk about and why and where the boundaries are. So thank you for taking the time, council, to have this discussion. So, all right. Hello, Ms. Ostringer.
Hello, Chair Grumbine and commissioners. It's really good to see you all. It's been a while, and I hope you all been well. Yes, so that's a very good summary of what Mr. Hamilton told me I would be discussing today. So I've taken our standard Brown Act training and abbreviated it as much as I can to try and focus on those 2 specific areas for you, which are what can you talk about, or how can you talk offline when you're not in a public meeting, and why or what can you talk about if it's not on the agenda. Next slide, please. So to get started, I think the most important thing is to understand the purpose and the history behind the Brown Act. So it was enacted in 1953, in response to a lot of closed door meetings and allegations of corruption that were occurring across the state. Many other states have a similar statute. I think you can see from the summary that's in the government code of its purpose, it's intended to create an open and transparent government. The last sentence is, I think, is the most telling. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. We, as a legislative body, serve the public, and so the best way to serve the public is to make sure that we have public participation and that they can understand all the decisions that are being made. So that's really the intent behind the Brown Act. Next slide. So the Brown Act covers a very broad section of legislative bodies, and that's intentional. You can see here I've cited some government code sections. It's who's covered and what's covered. It's a commission, a committee, a board, or any other body that's created by charter, ordinance, resolution, or formal action, which could be a motion. It doesn't matter if it's a decision-making body or an advisory body. If it's created in that manner, then it will fall under the Brown Act. As you all know, the HLC was created through a charter section, and so that's why you are covered under the Brown Act. Similarly, standing committees that are also covered under the Brown Act, and there's a fine distinction between a standing committee and an ad hoc committee that I'll get into in just a minute. But a standing committee is covered if it has continuing subject matter jurisdiction, or it has a regular meeting schedule that's fixed by some formal action, like a motion or a resolution. So HLC actually has many standing committees. The Historic District Subcommittee that did the bungalow tour is a standing committee covered by the Brown Act, because even though it doesn't have a regular meeting schedule, it does have a long-standing continuing subject matter. So that's why it had to be agendized for that tour that you took. Next slide, please. So an ad hoc committee is less than a quorum, and they are exempt so long as it's for a short duration and to conduct a specific task. And once that specific task is finished, the committee is dissolved. The distinction is sometimes fine, because what's a short duration and what's a specific task? So when a board or commission creates a subcommittee, or even the council, we ask staff to just check in with the city attorney's office so we can help determine which of these categories it's going to fall into. And if it is an ad hoc committee, then you're able to meet in private and discuss business and move forward in that way. Next slide, please. I think this is fairly straightforward. What's a meeting under the Brown Act? It's any meeting where a majority of the legislative body meet at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any matter that's within their subject matter jurisdiction. And so it is broad. You'll note it says take action, but the hear, discuss, or deliberate also means that it can be anything. Like in this case where I'm providing you with a training, the Brown Act is within your subject jurisdiction because you're required to follow it. So this is a meeting and it'll be subject to the same Brown Act requirements. So when I finish my presentation, even though it seems unusual, we have to open it up for public comment. Next slide, please. An action is somewhat broad. I think it's fairly straightforward. It's basically anytime you're making a decision, and that could be through a formal motion, a collective commitment or promise. If you're talking in a consent meeting and you say, okay, well, next time, we want to give this project design approval, that could be, that's an action that you're taking. And then of course you have your motions, resolutions, and ordinances. Next slide. So under the Brown Act, a meeting is defined, as we just saw, as a same time, same place, location. But there's also an exception where a meeting occurs through serial conversations that are taking place outside of the actual public meeting. And these are a violation of the Brown Act. And the Brown Act says that a majority of the members of the body shall not, outside a meeting, use a series of communications of any kind, directly or through intermediaries, to discuss, deliberate, or take action. So again, you have that same discuss, deliberate, or take action language that the regular public meeting has. Next slide. So this is, I think, where you wanted to touch base with. So under a serial meeting, we have a chain and a wagon wheel scenario. What they have in common is it's an outside communication that starts with one member and then tends to either chain out or spiral out like a spoke of a wagon wheel. Next slide. So here's an example of a scenario under the chain. If we had a 5-person commission, and in that commission, A talks to B outside of the meeting, and then B turns around and talks to C, and then C follows up and goes and talks to D. It's possible none of the A didn't know that B had talked to C and C to D, but that doesn't matter because it had a majority of the body had been in communication even unbeknownst to each other, a violation had occurred. Similar with a wagon wheel scenario, same thing, 5-person commission. In this case, A is the hub of the wheel, the start and hub of communication. And so A talks to B, and then A talks to C, and A talks to D. So a majority has been in communication, even though B, C, and D may not have realized that they were participating in a conversation. It's still a Brown Act violation. So you can see why it's really important to try to limit your outside communication, not only because we want these discussions and the benefit of everybody coming together at one meeting in one public place so that the public can benefit from the conversations, but it's easy to unintentionally have these conversations that kind of spiral out and create a violation without even knowing it. Next slide. And it's not just a matter of communicating verbally. These communications and serial meetings can occur in any matter of communication. So you have your email, texting, notes. Ariel likes the stone tablet example. And
it's very HLC-ish.
Yeah.
You approve of stone tablets.
With regards to email and texting, just something to keep in mind. This isn't necessarily a Brown Act issue, unless, of course, you're sending your emails, which are easy to forward and create that daisy chain or even a wagon wheel issue. Your emails about your public business, even if they're on your personal devices, are public records. So I just like to throw that out there. If we were to get a Public Records Act request, we'd ask that you search your records and return those to us. Next slide. So there are exceptions that allow for communications outside of a public meeting. They're somewhat limited, but I think they're straightforward. So staff can talk to each of you individually about anything to answer your questions. The only thing that staff can't do is communicate, and they have to be careful not to communicate any position or statements that another commissioner has made to them, because if that occurs, then the staff member becomes the hub of the wagon wheel and creates the Brown Act violation. So it's not even in that case, it's not even a commissioner that's engaging in the violation, it's the staff member that's causing the violation on behalf of the body. Next slide. The other exception is lobbying. So members of the public, of course, have the right to talk to their elected officials and try and lobby for their positions. The only thing that is not allowed is for a member of the body to engage in a member of the public or some other person as an intermediary to act on their behalf and go and lobby other members on their behalf. Next slide. I'm going to run through these. I think they're pretty self-explanatory fairly quickly. So conferences and seminars, a majority can attend the same conference or seminar. They just can't discuss city business among themselves. The discussion has to relate in some way in the public setting to the conference or seminar material. Next slide. Community meetings, same thing. Majority attendance is fine. There's no sidebar discussions. Usually if you're going to a meeting, a community meeting, and there's a majority, we tend to recommend that you not sit next to each other if possible, so that the public perception is that there's no conversation occurring between the members. Next slide. Same thing with attendance at other local agencies, bodies, no sidebar discussions. Next slide. And you're welcome to attend social and ceremonial events. You can party together. We recommend that you do not have any sidebar discussions or to leave the city business behind and just enjoy yourself, because in these social settings, that's where it's easy and to engage in that unintended serial chain discussion or the wagon wheel. Next slide. The last exception is attendance at standing committee meetings. So a majority may attend a standing committee meeting. So for example, if you all wanted to attend the State Street Advisory Committee meeting, you could, but you could only observe. You would not be able to participate or make any discussion at the meeting. Next slide. So now we're getting into the agenda. Under the Brown Act, no action or discussion shall be undertaken on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. And the reason for this goes back to the purpose of the Brown Act, in that we want members of the public to be able to know that an item's coming up so that they can participate. If a discussion occurs that's not been posted on the agenda, the public has no way of knowing that they should have been there, that they should have been involved, or to be able to hear that information. So that's why not having discussions on items not on the agenda is so important and critical to the Brown Act and its purpose. But there is 5 exceptions. Next slide. And I think of them as the housekeeping exceptions. And your general business items that you just concluded, I think, are really the perfect example of that. So when a member of the public speaks at public comment, general public comment, it's okay for you to ask a question or to make a brief response statement to whatever they have said. The only time it becomes an issue is if more questions start being asked and more statements are being made, then you've created this discussion that's not on the agenda. So it's best if to keep your questions brief, and we generally recommend that you don't respond, but that's really up to you. And if it's an item that you think may be of interest for a whole group, then it would be appropriate to request that it be put on a future agenda so you can really get into it and talk about that. You can ask, or staff can ask, for a brief clarification or make a brief announcement or give subcommittee reports. And a good example is what Nicole talked about in her briefing, and the announcement of Eli Isaacson as Community Development Director. That's another good example. Next slide. And so if as part of your guidelines, you can actually ask staff to put things on the agenda. So you can ask them to report back on something. You can ask them to place it on the agenda, or you can provide staff and the body with a certain reference information if it's germane to the subject matter. Next slide. In very rare circumstances, an item can be placed and discussed on an agenda after the agenda has been published. It requires a 2/3 vote by the members, or if not everyone is present, then at least a unanimous vote. And there needs to be facts that indicate that there is a need to take immediate action, and that the need for that action came to the attention of the agency after the agenda was posted. So it's very extremely rare. It's usually used in emergency situations. It wouldn't be something that would be appropriate if, so we just simply forgot to put an item on the agenda. We couldn't use it then. It would just have to wait to the next meeting. Next slide, please.
Unless we blame it on COVID, right? That we can do that.
Blame everything on COVID. There are criminal penalties for violation of the Brown Act, and there's also civil remedies if it's been violated. I won't spend a lot of time. Next slide. If a member of the body intentionally violates a Brown Act, then they could be potentially guilty of a misdemeanor. I don't know why anyone would intentionally want to do that. Next slide. Then for civilly, if a violation has occurred, the district attorney or any member of the public can bring a civil action to prevent future violations of the Brown Act, or they can get the determination that the Brown Act's been violated, and then the action that was taken needs to be rescinded. And so that's the public remedy. Next slide. I think we're done. Yeah, so it's all about being open and transparent, and remembering that we serve the public and the public's interest. And the best way to do that is to make sure that they know about what we're talking about and that they know when we're talking about it. And I can take any questions, and just a reminder that public comment needs to be opened.
Oh, yes, thank you. And sunshine. All right, that's the public comment part. All right, so let's go to public comment for this item. So anyone wishing in the public to comment on this item, please click on the green hand arrow icon, be called upon, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Chair Grumbine, and for any members of the public attending by webinar, please follow the instructions on screen. And Ms. Turnowstead, did you receive any written correspondence regarding this?
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, and commissioners. We did not receive any written correspondence for this item. Back to you, Mr. Hamilton.
Okay, thank you. And I do see Richard Clausen with his hand raised. Mr. Clausen, I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, and thank you, Chair Grumbine and commissioners, and Ms. Ostrander. I find it very interesting that public comment seems to have grown out of the Brown Act, and here I am taking advantage of it myself. Thank you for that. It seemed to me from the presentation, which I'll admit was interrupted by a phone call on my end, and I missed a middle section, but it seemed to me that a serial meeting, which is not allowed, would require a majority of the commissioners to be in attendance, so that some number under that majority could meet and discuss things. And if they were actually friends, could chat about items, as long as there was not a majority of the members. And I see that HLC has got 9 members, so that up to four friends who happen to be HLC members could talk among themselves if they made a solemn and blood oath that they would not talk to any other members that would then enlarge the either the chain or the wagon wheel beyond their members. I was hoping for some examples from Ms. Ostringer of out-of-meeting communications between commissioners that comply with the Brown Act. The presentation seemed to be pretty heavy on things that, you can't do this and you can't do that and you can't do that other thing either. But what are some common examples of activities between commissioners outside of a meeting that are acceptable and would not violate the Brown Act? And I understand that you don't have to answer my questions. I'm just putting them out there. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see any additional hands raised at this time. So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, back to you for questions.
All right. And Commissioner Lendick, since this was a discussion that started with a brief discussion at HLC and now made it a larger one for discussion purposes, do you want to kick us off? With questions, and then we can go questions and discussion on it. It's because it seems like, well, for one, my guess is we're probably not going to be taking any action on it. We're probably just wanting to have a discussion discussion to understand things more. I think it's in order. So questions and discussion. Commissioner Lendick, did you want to start? You have no audio. We can't hear you. So do you want to try to go click out, shut down, and go back in? And does someone else want to jump in with questions in the meantime? If no one else wants to ask, one thing is I would like to re-ask Ms. Ostringer from the question from the public, if you wouldn't mind taking a shot at that.
Yes, Commissioner Grumbine.
I got it.
Oh, all right. Commissioner Lendick. All right, we'll hold that one. Commissioner Lendick might have the same one, but did you have...
My question is, as long as 4 of us are not a majority, we can chat.
I'm not sure I understand.
And I guess that's the question I asked the attorney.
Yes, Chair Grumbine and Commissioner Lendick, yes. As long as it's not a majority of the board, you may talk outside of the meeting. You just have to be careful of not engaging in that wagon wheel or the daisy chain. And I think Mr. Clausen said, take the blood oath not to share information between the 4 of you. It's possible. The only thing you have to be careful then is if a 5th member comes in and starts talking to you about something, about the same thing, not knowing that you'd already had that conversation with 4 others. But yes, you can.
I, on occasion, will send the chair and vice chair a comment regarding an upcoming agenda item. And I don't think that's a problem. I'm not asking them to make a decision. I'm saying make sure that we discuss this or whatever.
That's not a problem.
Yeah, although planning staff felt it was. And their comment to me was, if you want to ask them a question, you ask it through us. Well, I don't agree with that. So that's why the clarification of your discussion is occurring. It's pretty simple to me that as long as the 4 or less are chatting about inconsequential things or even consequential things, this shouldn't be a problem.
It's not a Brown Act problem as long as, like you said, it's not a majority. The only thing is from an agenda management, I know that the staff likes to know what's going on and what they want, what's going to be on the agenda.
And we would like staff to know what's going on. That would be a big help. But sometimes I gotta ask the chair or the vice chair to make sure that does come up and be discussed.
And I would just have an added part to that, or added point in that. And for some things, especially like email, as you know, the wagon wheel example of it going out to multiple people or things being forwarded on, or the potential for the, I don't know, sort of wildfire spread that can happen is just something that needs to be made sure of in terms of that things are very careful. And the blood oath was probably the best way of doing that, but of keeping that. But I would say in terms of just practicality and caution, that it would be probably best to try to keep it as limited as possible, and be clear to others as well that it's limited. Because if you do send out an email that it could be going to 5 people, but they're blind copied or whatever, then that would be a violation. I'm assuming if it was all about a subject that we were actually doing. Not that you were doing it, Commissioner Lendick, but I just want to make sure it's like clear.
The attorney was asked this question at the State Street Select Committee kickoff meeting. And the attorney said, what, there are 15 of you here? As long as 7 of you, no more than 7 of you are talking about State Street problems, that's not a big deal. And then, unless I heard Teva wrong at that meeting, then, minority can talk about the problems. Or about State Street. It's not a problem, but State Street.
And Chair Grumbine and Commissioner Lendick, I did say that. I don't think I said it's not a problem. I did say it's not a violation of the Brown Act. I still have the same concerns that you get to that very fine limit and then there's just one person that tips it right over. But yeah, no, it's not a Brown Act violation.
As long as you all have a drink in your hand. Wait, no, never mind. Just kidding, for the public's sake. That was just a joke.
Watch it there, buddy.
So, yeah, I know. So, okay, I think this is helpful and clear on those aspects. So I think that the main thing is just being very careful that we're staying well below, for any of those discussions, staying well below our quorum, and being very cognizant that if there is a discussion of something off the topic. This is a related question. So for things like State Street discussions or other things that there isn't necessarily, say there was the Chapala Street discussion or things like that, there isn't anything agendized. There isn't any even real strong future, like just make up I don't know, whatever the street is, Milpas or whatever. It's not even in our jurisdiction. But if there was a place that was potentially within our jurisdiction, or potentially had some overlap with us because it was a historic building or whatever, but has nothing to do with anything that's currently in plan that we know of, and having a discussion about it, but it not being part of anything that we're in a decision control of or that we know of. Is that a potential violation, or is that an issue, or does it not become an issue until it starts to become really a project, or it becomes more of a public thing that people are actually, moving towards something? Or where can you not, where is the clearly safe zone versus the clearly danger zone on that?
So Chair Grumbine, so that's that's a hard one to answer, because it goes to what's your subject matter jurisdiction? Is there the potential that it could come before you? Say it's a specific, say it was the project at 711 North Milpas Street, just as an example. That's ABR jurisdiction. It's not yours. But I always would err on the side of caution, just if you want to have a discussion about it, that we put it on the agenda. However, that's not really your jurisdiction. And then could it possibly be within your jurisdiction? I think there's some things within the code that says that ABR can refer something over to HLC for a consultation. So that's where that fine line starts to balance out. but yeah, it's a hard one. And I assume you mean, Chair Grumbine, that you would be having these conversations offline, that you just.
Yeah.
Five of you.
Offline, yeah. 5 of us are sitting around, drinking beers and looking on Milpas and looking at out the window.
Yeah.
And wanting to talk about something.
So, if it's not within your subject matter jurisdiction, but that's a fine line, particularly because it's a project. So, your subject matter jurisdiction might be discussing Mr. Drury's art paintings.
But what if those come within our jurisdiction?
Well, then you got a problem.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? Discussion?
I have a comment.
All right.
As I understand it, the state legislature, Senate and Assembly aren't governed by the Brown Act. Is that correct?
I believe they're the Bagley-Keene.
What?
The Bagley-Keene Act. It's the same thing. It's just called something different.
Oh. They get a fancier name. All right. Other questions or discussion on it? Now we can talk about LA though, right? We can make fun of LA.
Sure.
Okay, good. This is as long as we have something to talk about. Otherwise, we have very boring groups of 5 meetings.
It sort of reminds
right.
me of the old joke, Mr. Chair, about first prize is a drink with 1 commissioner, second prize is a drink with 3. Get it? No. Oh, Lord.
That's over my head. I'm only the vice chair. What do I know?
Yeah. All right. Any other questions or discussions? All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I just wanted to say I did appreciate the public comment of trying to tell you things, how you can talk and the ways you can talk. I'll take that to heart to try in the next training, not make it so that it's what you can't do so much as you can, but unfortunately you have to understand what you can't.
As long as you wear a big enough cowboy hat and they can't see your face, then you can talk.
Oh, good Lord.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you,
Yeah, well,
Ms.
I think we're good to go. We've been boosted up for our Brown Act for the year. All right. Thank you very much. All right. So let's close this item and on to item 2. This is the 1200 block of Carpinteria. I think we're on schedule time-wise, pretty close. So, all right. So 1200 block of Carpinteria Street right-of-way, archaeology report and historic property survey report. This is a proposal to remove the existing structurally deficient Carpinteria Street bridge over Sycamore Creek and install a new single-span concrete bridge. The project also includes new sidewalks, channel walls, revegetation of creek banks, street and pedestrian lighting, and fencing. This is part A is requesting acceptance of the memo archaeological survey report prepared by Rincon Consultants, and part B is requesting acceptance of a memo historic property survey report prepared by Rincon Consultants. All right, so Mr. Hamilton, you have. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Manuel after.
I need to recuse myself from this project and the next. This one with a conflict of interest for the applicant and the next for the owner.
All right. Thank you for letting us know.
The meeting.
All right. All right, Mr. Hamilton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. I just wanted to give some brief guiding comments here. So this items A and B, just for acceptance of these 2 reports. And these reports were distributed to you by the Secretary at the HLC members only page. They are private documents for the most part, since they contain sensitive information. So that's true for the archaeological report and the historic property survey report. However, we do have the first 21 pages of the historic property survey report and memo available to show on screen if you want to refer to that at any time during this hearing. And I also wanted to note for item A that Dr. Glassow reviewed the archaeological report and agrees with the conclusions and recommendations of the study. And I believe we have a team from Public Works here, Eric Goodall, and their consultant from Rincon as well.
Great, thank you. All right, so if the consultants and team would like to come on camera, or let us know if you're just via phone. All right. And Mr. Goodall, visual. All right, so welcome. If you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for the record, and again, we have a 15-minute timer, and I know normally archaeology reports don't take as long to, as a summary, but I think you can probably, between the two reports, split the time and kind of walk us through your summary and findings. Obviously, we can only use the first part of the short report, so if there is visual to see, otherwise, if you could just give us a summary, and then we'll go starting with item A and then to item B for comments and questions and action, and also public comments for both of them. So if you would go right ahead.
Thank you, Chair Grumbine. I'll introduce the team. I'm Eric Goodall. I'm the supervising civil engineer with the city and managing this project. And our consultant is Dewberry, and their subconsultant, Rincon, prepared both of these studies. So that'll hand over to Rachel and Hannah, who prepared each of the studies.
Hi. Yep. Hi, I'm Hannah Haas. I'm the archaeologist that prepared the ASR and the archaeological MEA memo.
And my name is Rachel Purcell. I'm with Rincon, architectural historian here locally, and I worked on the built environment portions of the study.
Great, you're welcome. So why don't you give us, we can start with the part A, archaeological survey report. Why don't you give us a summary, and just kind of give a quick overview of your little tiny report, and then we can go to item B for the rest of it.
Sure. Yeah. So the archaeological survey report was prepared for this project. We determined the area of potential effect with Caltrans. So it includes the full project footprint, which includes some areas up the creek for vegetation improvements, and then the replacement of the bridge. There are no archaeological resources present within the area of potential effect, and none nearby that could be potentially impacted. We didn't identify anything during our own fieldwork and previous studies in the area. There have been, I believe, 6 previous cultural resources studies that included this area of potential effect, including one that did include some shovel test pits, and none of those studies identified anything either. So we determined that the sensitivity of the area is low, and just included standard unanticipated discoveries measures just in case something pops up, but low sensitivity, no real potential for impact here.
All right, thank you. And then do you want to continue, Ms. Purcell, with the
Sure.
part B?
Sure, I can jump in here. Thanks, Hannah. I was specifically focused on the built environment, the area of potential effect, and specifically on the bridge itself that's in place currently. We went out to the site, we performed some background research. It did turn out that the bridge had been previously evaluated for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We did some, outreach to some local historical societies and other groups that are known to have knowledge of historical resources in this area, and provided some additional context in the MEA. And we did agree with the previous finding that the bridge is ineligible, and therefore there are no potential for impacts to the bridge itself since it's not a resource.
Okay. And does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
All right.
Unless Eric,
Okay.
unless you'd like to jump in at all, Eric.
I think that was great. Thank you.
All right, thank you all. So now we'll go to public comment for this item, both A and B. Any member of the public wishing to comment on either the archaeology report or the historic structures report, please click on the green arrow hand icon and you'll have 2 minutes to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. And for anybody attending by webinar, please follow the instructions on screen to get oral public comment. Ms. Ternostka, have you received any written correspondence on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton, and Commissioners, no written public comment was received for this item. Back to you.
Okay, thank you. It's current. So, Commissioner, to you.
Okay, it sounded, you were broken up there, but it sounded like there was no other public commenters, so you were turning it back to us. All right, so, okay, so back to the commission for any questions. Let's start with the archaeology report, and then we can go on to the part B. All right, archaeology report. Any questions for the archaeology? All right, any discussion about it? All right, is there someone that wants to make a motion for part A?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right.
To accept the report as presented.
That was a big chance. You already had a second before you even said what your motion was. You could have done, had a crazy motion.
Good Lord.
All right. Motion by Commissioner Drury, second by Commissioner Uli. Under discussion. Any discussion? Accepting archaeology report. All right. Let's have a roll call vote.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Edmonds.
Yes.
Commissioner Lundick,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. Thank you.
All right.
Make a motion to accept the historic properties survey report / memo.
Sorry, could you say that motion again? You were breaking up.
Do you want me to say it broken up or just put it? No. I'll make a motion to accept the historic property survey report / memo.
Second.
I heard the second from Commissioner Edmonds. So under discussion, any discussion on the historic property survey report? No? All right, in that case, let's have a roll call vote.
All right, thank you. I'll go ahead and start with Commissioner Lundick,
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan,
Yes.
Commissioner Uli,
Yes.
Vice Chair House,
Yes.
Commissioner Drury,
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds,
Yes.
and Chair Grumbine.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all. And thank you for the in-depth report.
Thank you.
All right, well, we are unfortunately too good at serving the public because we are on to agenda item 3, but we're a little ahead of time. So, Mr. Hamilton, should we take a 10-minute recess or what?
Mr. Chair, that sounds like a good idea. The earliest the next item can be heard is 2:45 p.m., so a recess till then would work.
All right, sounds good. All right, no chatting offline, 5 of you.
I'm having computer issues, so I'm going to log out and try to log back in. So just know that I'm working on it. Thank you.
No wagon wheels or chains either.
Let's reconvene Historic Landmarks Commission September 15th, 2021. All right, and we are on item 3, 1221 Anacapa Street. This is a continued item for project design approval and final approval. This is a proposal to construct a new 500 kilowatt solar photovoltaic system on the upper level of the city-owned Granada Garage located in LCPV that will also function as a parking canopy. The superstructure will have a maximum height of 46 feet 11 inches and consists of painted high-strength steel columns and beams with galvanized light gauge steel purlins on top to support and attach to the solar modules. The project also includes the removal of existing rooftop light poles and 13 small olive trees in pots to allow for the new solar photovoltaic canopy. Planning Commission approved a height exception on December 10th, 2020, allowing the project to proceed. The standard height limit of 45 feet in commercial general high density residential priority housing overlay CG zone. And the project design approval and final approval are requested. The project requires consistency with the project compatibility findings and the following guidelines. EPV design guidelines, solar energy system design guidelines, tree removal findings are required. Project was last reviewed on June 23rd, 2021 with a full commission hearing. And the motion from last time was to continue 4 weeks with the following comments. The commission appreciates the reduction in height of the project. The project as proposed with floating plaster cornices is incongruous with Alto Viejo guidelines. There should be a, now, was this the last, sorry, Mr. Hamilton? Was this the last, maybe it's just my memory is not right.
This is from June.
Did we have any comments after that? Yeah.
I will double check on that. Bear with me just a moment.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just hold for a little bit here. And then as a
Chair, it was sent to a special committee to work with the designer. If you recall.
Yes. Yep. That was you and Commissioner Mahan. Is that right? Commissioner Lenzik and Commissioner Mahan. Yeah. So and I wasn't sure if I thought that happened after this one. I thought there was a meeting in.
There was another full commission meeting after this one because
in like July or something.
For us, and so we saw one with a trellis proposal.
Yeah,
which
that's right.
Then forwarded to the subcommittee.
Yep, and then there was subcommittee, and then they met and reported back. I think twice.
Yes, I think, Mr. Chair, I think Commissioner Mahan 2 weeks ago reported back on the subcommittee findings and was generally optimistic.
Yeah, that's right. Mr. Hamilton?
Mr. Chair and Commissioners, that's my mistake. The last review was July 21st. So I'm going to pull up those minutes and send them over to Mr. Bolton and we'll get them up on screen. Sorry about that.
Okay, sounds good. No problem. That's your first mistake this year, so you're good. We should have some Jeopardy music going right now.
I'll take prior minutes for 500.
On this month, the HLC met and said the following phrase.
We are making for some very exciting television here.
Yeah. If we all hold still, really, really still, they might think like everything froze.
Yeah.
This is going to add to our ratings.
You know, if we didn't have Brown Act issues, we could talk about all kinds of fun stuff right now. But
yeah.
All right, commissioners, we should have those minutes up for you momentarily. Just for the applicant team, I elevated Bree Winkler to a panelist so she can hop in if needed. And it looks like we're ready to go.
Oh, there we go. Looks like we're good. All right, so we're back in action here. So this is the last motion on July 21st, I believe, was to continue for 4 weeks with the following comments. Commission appreciates the applicant's effort. This is an improvement from the previous submission. 2, while the Granada Theater side of the design is closer to approval, the Annam Street side of the trellis structure and the visibility of the solar panels is not supportable. The commission cannot make the findings for the design as is. 3, restudy the structure in a traditional tectonic trellis manner, especially the beams, girders, etc., and especially the elements visible from the street. One solution is to hide them completely from sight by putting them on the roof or reducing their number. 4, the lights shall be shrouded from public view. 5, look at simpler trellises at the Cottage Hospital, for example, with good traditional steel trellis appropriate to El Pueblo Viejo district. 6, call out all structures and their spacing, including the supports for the solar panels. 7, all simulations shall be coordinated so they all read according to the plan. The motion was by House, the second was by Uli with 800. Manuel was absent, and the motion carried. All right, so welcome to the applicant. Mr. Hamilton, do you have any other additional notes or anything else?
Yes, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, just a quick one. I wanted to inform you that this project is under a Permit Streamlining Act deadline. The deadline is October 2nd, 2021. So if the project gets continued today, it can't be continued any more than 2 weeks to the September 29th meeting. So I just wanted to let you know that. And if you choose to, I'm sorry?
And a question regarding that, Mr. Hamilton. Is that for project design approval or project design approval and final approval?
Project design approval. That's the main approval of the project, and that's the approval that's subject to the Permit Streamlining Act timeline.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead and continue with whatever else you were adding.
I was just going to note that if you do grant an action, it could be for either project design approval or project design approval and final approval at this hearing. So just to clarify that. That's all I've got.
Okay, thank you. All right, to the applicant. All right. Welcome.
Hello, Commissioners. Alelia Parento here with the city's Energy and Climate Division. Thanks for having us back. We're excited to be here with this latest design. I just really wanted to quickly kick off the presentation before Mr. Vicente and Lenny jump in and say a big thank you to the Commission. We really appreciated the ad hoc group, the 2 commissioners that came and met us on the roof and really helped us work towards what we think is a good design that we can all move forward and be proud of. So again, thank you to everyone. really appreciate the diligence and the work on this groundbreaking project. So with that, I'll hand it off to our architect.
All right. Thank you. Mr. DeVicente, did you want to, and I'm not sure if Mr. Lenny is on or will be on.
He's next to me, so I'll shift the camera to him.
Perfect. Okay, easy.
Well,
All right.
all right, so
All right,
thank
so
you.
you know the drill. You got 15 minutes, but you don't have to take it all. But yeah, there you go.
Yeah, we'll dive in. So thank you, Chair Grumbine and fellow commissioners. And yeah, I'll echo what Alelia said. This has been a good one, a push-pull, and we really appreciate the opportunity to work more closely with the ad hoc committee to really understand more clearly where the challenges were for this specific structure and how we could kind of mitigate that. So hopefully the rest of the commission is supportive of kind of where we ended up and fine-tune things. So let's just dive right into it. So let's go to the next page. Here again is just the existing roof plan highlighting our structural points of connection where the existing trees will be removed. So next page. So let's zoom in a little closer here. So let me pick up where we last left off with the commission. So what we showed you last time, this is very much, it's really, we've just been fine tuning. There's no major redesign here. So really what we've looked at is a couple of things. On the very north top part of the page, we've extended the array to, there's a shed structure there. We had an opportunity to extend to the north without adding any more visibility to it. And this move was, a couple of these moves are just to optimize the structural layout with what the garage was giving us and kind of balance where we lost some panels with where we're gaining. So at the top of the page there, you can see that. So the red
So
box.
Mr. Bolton, can you get him to circle it on the right area that you're talking about, Mr. Bolton?
The red boxes are the structural column point locations. The red lines are the main girders that run on top of the columns. And then the W10s are the blue beams, and then we'll get to some of the other smaller components in detail. So at the top of the page there is where we kind of close that in, where it says array outline. And then at the bottom of the page, where it says W10 girder, we also extended to next to the stair right at the bottom of the page there, another column point where we could carry the column. And to the left of that, along the Granada edge, we've actually pulled back the full cantilever from that side. So now the canopy, as you'll see in the Sims, is not visible from that area. So what this did is this goes to address the comment of just traditional, a little more traditional on the layout and connecting these big cantilevered elements were a struggle for the commission. So we looked at opportunities where we could reduce those, and we did that in these key corners that were more visible. The other item to the right-hand side there, you see Anapamu. You can see some of the tube steel purlins. We've really kind of fine-tuned that, and we'll look at that in sections to really go to more detail in the visible areas to help the structure look more like a trellis. So beyond that, our design strategy is still the same. The inverters are on the interior columns, kind of the mechanics, if you will, of it above the hood of a car level. So they'll be integrated and onto the roof deck area, not visible from the surrounding area. And then we've got light fixtures to the underside of the structure as you've seen before, which is pretty much the same. So let's go to the next page. Elevations, not really anything to see here. It's essentially the same as it was. Let's go to the next page. It's really in the sections that we'll really take a look. Again, we've been fine tuning more than anything. Next page. All right, bottom right. Let's zoom into the bottom right 3 sections there. Perfect. All right, Anapamusai, the most visible of the project. So essentially what you can see from the structure coming up is the columns are still there. And then the girder, or the beam, the W18 beam as we're calling it, comes in and lands on top of that, the W10 girder just above that. And then we've got our 4x6 tube steel, which we've extended back full bay, as you kind of saw in the roof plan there. Those are going back about, I think they're about 16 feet or so, if I remember. And so these are 32 inches on center, 4x6 tube steel capped on the ends. And then just to the outside edge, you can see we added a lattice 2x2 tube steel to create some shadowing on that kind of southeast face there. So this was kind of softening that with some more traditional trellis elements. The other thing of note here is we took these 4x6s and made them the support piece for the panels themselves. So on this end, where we previously had a sawtooth and a gap, we've actually put the solar modules flat on this area. So this goes back again to the portion of where these 4x6s end, and they're picked up by another W10, as you kind of saw in the roof plan. So this was the main thing we did on this side. So let's go to this section above. Here's the other dramatic move from the Granada side. We've eliminated the cantilevers that were going out and carrying the sawtooth panels out to the parapet edge. So you can see it here, how it's pulled back to where the column line is internal. It's about 13.3 back from the parapet edge, and just pulls the whole thing back from that point. In the next section, on Victoria Street side, we really haven't made any changes. The columns really kind of do carry to the parapet face, and we're carrying the beams and the girders and the panels really to that edge. And as you've seen in the previous few sims, it's not that visible just because of the oblique angles we get into. Let's go to the next page. Again, here is our square LED light. This is going to be located kind of flush with the structure and kind of tucked up in the W10 kind of bay. So it's already going to have the structure kind of blocking it, and we're keeping it back from the edge. It's really in the drive aisles where this is. So if we have any areas as we go through installation that it's potentially seen from down below, any visible, we can put a little steel panel or a little panel there to just block that light, because we don't want any spillover. So let's go into the view sims, and I'll hand it to Henry here. And Henry, if you could pick up on this. I talked about the structural columns, but I think if you want to talk about the additional columns we added, this is probably the best place to see it.
Yes, you're familiar with the first two, but if we go right down to the bottom where it says new design, one of the goals that I think we were struggling with in the beginning, and I gotta say, Bill and Ed Lemvik were great at basically communicating this, because I think at least I was a little bit lost on how we were gonna do this. But it did work. We added some false columns, as you can see. They're not obviously spaced equally, but it's still, they're effective enough, because when you view this at this point, it'll be difficult for someone, unless you're a perfectionist, that the columns are not really spaced correctly. And, just as an aside for a moment, I was walking the day before yesterday on the Carrillo Adobe, and interestingly enough, those columns do not have any rhythm or anything. They're all random. And subconsciously, I think that's what makes the Adobe so charming. It's just, it's not that formal. So I'm hoping that this same effect will occur here. Now, while we're here, I think Bill Mahan suggested a color that would blend better with the sky. I think it's called driftwood. And I did a rendering and indeed, it really removed the high contrast of the dark that we were proposing originally, and it did make it blend more into the sky. Okay, next.
So how about can you talk about the flattened panels?
Oh,
on
yeah,
that?
you know, sorry.
Yeah, you
let's
can use
go-
it here,
Okay. One of the things that was a big problem in this elevation is the sawtooth pattern that we were having. It just created too much of a light-dark distraction up there, and it made it very, very prominent. And so we thought that maybe, as you saw in the section, by actually flattening the panels, that distraction will completely go away. And it did. And it really does make it a lot more believable that this is a pergola structure as opposed to we did before. The big enemy before was, amazingly enough, the sawtooth pattern that was so visible and noticeable. All right, go to the next page. Well, from this point of view, you can see you hardly see anything here. Not hardly see anything. You don't see anything at this corner from eye level. Next. And from Anacapa Street going down towards the ocean, that is also, the structure is not visible. And then from the parking garage portion of it, now this becomes a new argument because it was set back significantly away from the parapet wall, and now you don't see any of it. Next. And this is looking from the tower of the clock tower of the courthouse, essentially. And if you remember some of the previous proposals that we did, it became a lot more subtle than we had it before. And so it does look like a flat roof as opposed from that distance anyway. You can also see on the left-hand side that false columns that we put at the very end towards the Granada Theater. And that was very effective. We had an issue in trying to pick up that cantilever beam, and this made it a lot more credible. Next. Well, in this elevation, it's like nothing happened. So very happy about that. Because in this elevation, you would be able to step far back enough, I think if you were coming from State Street, and then get a clear view. But by pushing it back to 13 feet, that resolved the issue altogether. Next. All right, on the alley side of it, they're visible, but once you're in the alley or approaching the alley, they really disappear because you can't step far back enough to be able to see what's going up there. And keep in mind also that this drawing is simplified, but there's a lot of things there in the alley as well. There's some light fixtures, there's some doors, and there's a lot of things going on at the pedestrian level. I think that's it, isn't it? Oh, yeah. Well, this is also another view that explains what we did probably better than anything else, I think. You see the 2x2 elements that we placed there. The purpose of those, if I understood correctly from Bill Mahan, what's more than anything else is to cast shadow on the larger beams. Now, the one thing that you see here, those 2x2s are shown with a significant cantilever off the beam. They're going to be less than that.
Okay, so I'll take it from there. So there you go. Oh, and the color. Thank you, Henry. The driftwood color we have here, it's kind of this dull gray, similar to the courthouse across the street. If you look at the eaves there, the color, it's really kind of a toned down lighter color, and it really blends well with the wall and not creating a contrast like the darker brown we had before. So as you can see, it's really been a lot of just fine tuning and refinement and just where the structure came down and really helping it look more like traditional. So between the detailing and the overall layout, it's hopefully the commission thinks we've all done a good job. Again, we appreciate the input from the ad hoc committee and the time spent. And that's pretty much it, our presentation. And as far as the solar panels, we're balancing pretty much what we lost is what we've gained back. The cover sheet has the exact number, but overall, we're still in good shape for the solar production. So thank you.
And actually along that, and I was trying to get Mr. Bolton to point it out at the time. Could you have him point out where the ones that you gained were, the panels that you gained? If you could go to that sheet, and then until he circles the right clump of panels or wherever they were added.
Yeah, it's a little hard to describe. I would say at the very top of the page, the first two bays to the upper right-hand corner, from that added column there, we really captured those two bays there on the top page there. And then it's really the same thing on the bottom. So at the bottom, going towards the stair, we've got two bays with about 3 rows. Just behind that trellis portion there is where we captured some, just on that bottom edge. There's a couple of rows of panels that were captured there.
Okay, all right. All right, so does that complete your presentation?
It does, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so let's go to public comment for this item. Any member of the public wishing to comment on this item, please click on the green arrow hand icon, raise the hand, and you'll have 2 minutes to speak on the item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. And if you would like to give verbal public comment and you're attending by webinar, please follow the instructions on screen. And Ms. Ternoska, did we receive any written correspondence for this item?
Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We did not receive any written correspondence for this item. Back to you.
Thank you. I do see one hand raised by Richard Clausen. Richard Clausen, I'm going to unmute you. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. All right, please go ahead.
Mr. Hamilton, Chair Grumbine, Commissioners. I'm tempted just to let you listen to 2 minutes of silence and reconsider the plans there. I am so disappointed that this project has taken so long with so many back and forth submissions when the requirements that the commission is required to find to make this compatible with EPV have been public knowledge for years, and yet staff don't seem to bring projects that acknowledge those sorts of things. I think what we've seen today is an obfuscating presentation with emphasis on tube steel extensions and interior inverters and color choices, column asymmetry, inconsequential views from the roof and Anacapa and the alley side. I don't want this to be a credible pergola. I want it to be an invisible pergola. And I think that you could do that if you just eliminated a row of panels along the Anapamu side and just pulled everything in away from the parapet. I just think that what you've got has not been tweaked enough. I don't think tweak is appropriately strenuous for a project that still is quite visible from the Anapamu Street. You know, frankly, I thought that we might have seen the last of this sort of formal disrespect of HLC by city staff with Mr. Dayton's retirement, but I must have been wrong. I just think this project needs more staff direction and more staff insight to what the HLC can and must do to find compatibility findings. I don't think that that's been happening. I think the staff has let down the applicant's the city, let down the architect and the designers. My 2 minutes is up.
All right, thank you.
All right, there are no additional hands raised at this time. So, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, we can close public comment and move on to questions.
All right, to the board for questions.
Mr. Chair.
To Vice Chair House.
I would be interested to know why the 4x6s, I forget exactly how much they cantilever out, but why do they extend so little and only have 3 2x2s on top of them? I was kind of expecting to see something that was more clearly trellis-like, casting more serious shadow on the columns. So it just seems very minimal, and I'm wondering what the reason for that was. Is there some reason they can't cantilever further?
Yeah, we looked at this. First of all, we selected the size of these members because we didn't want to have any much larger members than that would make the beam underneath subservient. We selected 3 of them because selecting more of them and squishing them together would begin to make the top solid again, which is not what we wanted. Now,
I think Vice Chair House, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your question too. Aren't you saying that the 4x6 tube steel here capped in the end, is your question, why doesn't that extend further? Like right now, it extends 2 feet right now and has 3 2x2 steel tubes on top as the trellis portion. You're saying, well, why isn't it extended 3 feet or 4 feet, right? The 4x6s, is that is that what you're asking? Okay, because then okay, I just want to make sure the applicant understands that question.
Well, again, a typical pergola that you would have to be careful about expanding it too much. Then it begins to lose some credibility on the aesthetics and the proportions to the rest of the building. We looked at various options for cantilevering, and Ed and I felt that the 2 feet would be enough as long as they would extend beyond the parapet wall. And I think, personally speaking, I think that's going to do the job.
Okay.
Mr. Chair? Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Lenvick.
Yeah, you might want to ask Bill Mahan, if he's still with us, and myself to comment on our work with the applicant at the
I think that's a great question. Commissioner Lenvick.
Is Mr. Mahan available?
Commissioner Mahan, are you on?
I'm here.
Do you want? Go ahead.
You want me to speak first?
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, well, I think that what we decided was that the Granada Paseo, the North Paseo, I guess we'll call it, and the Anacapa Street really are not issues. And the only issue is this facade where these columns can be seen from across the street on the library sidewalk. We're coming out of the library. That's really where the public will see this. My recollection is that the commission decided that the important views of this particular structure would be from the public right of way. So we focused on that, and we focused on these columns, these what we're talking about here, these beams that cantilever, and the latios, or the lattice that's on top of them. Now, whether it's a 3 lattice or 5 lattice, I think that the commission can make a decision on that. It looks to me like that's not much of a cantilever for a 4x6 tube steel will cantilever. So you could put 5 lattice on there if that's important, and it would give a better shadow on the columns. What was important to us was that when you looked up from the sidewalk at the library, you did not see through the roof. The roof is solid. These panels they show little spaces here, but you can't see through them, so they look like a solid roof, and that the structure would be a gray color so that it would take the shadows properly. And I think that the architect has been successful with that. So there may be some fine massaging that needs to be done here, but both Mr. Lenvik and I were happy with the way this solution is going. And we recognize that it had to come back to the full commission for final decisions.
Yeah, if the roof plan can go back on the screen, I'd appreciate it. Yeah, we met with the applicant and city staff several times, and I think that they've come a long way, and they have respected, to a large extent, our concerns about what this contemporary structure should look like in the EPV. And I think both Bill and I were concerned that the structure, because it's steel, not diverge away from what would be a structure if it was wood. We felt that we don't need to put scalloped ends on the steel beams. We don't need to do those things that might have been done in wood. This is a structure on top of a more traditional building, but it is holding up solar panels, which of course we have no control over. I think that the architect has gone a long way to satisfying our concerns about what this represents. And I would ask them, I have several questions for them. I would ask them, number one, why they couldn't move that plan down a little bit. It's off my screen a little bit, Mr. Hamilton. Why they couldn't on the north, we'll call it the north end, the alley end, why they couldn't have a column on each end of that blue beam there. Coming down the next major blue beam, which is 2 down, why they couldn't have a column under.
Well, can you make sure, Mr. If we can zoom in and make sure that what you're saying is being duplicated on the screen.
Circle the end of that blue beam. Circle the end of that blue beam. And on both ends of it.
That end,
not
and then
happening,
up top.
but
Got
right
it.
there,
Okay.
right there, and
Yeah.
then down the other end of it, all the way down. Right there, then go down 2 beams, down page. You gotta up your screen, sorry, no, that's fine, that's fine. Go down the other end of that blue beam.
Yeah, is that where you?
There, at that point, and then go all the way over to the southeast corner. That blue beam. Those 1, 2, 3, 4 beams are excessively long in their cantilever, and you would not find them in a traditional structure. They were able to solve that problem on the Anapamu Street frontage with false columns, I guess, or whatever. But I'm asking why they couldn't on these. Well, actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 columns. There's two there in the southwest. Why they couldn't have columns under the ends of what now are very large cantilevers? Is there a reason why that can't be done? You did it on the Anapamu frontage. Why can't it be done in these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 locations? That's a question.
The applicant.
Yeah, Chair Grumbine and Commissioner Lenvik. Yeah, thank you for the question. it helps for all of us to understand why we put things in certain places but not others. So it's really a two-part question. So let me talk to the visible side, the north end, if you will. So where it could be possible on the north end to add more faux columns. As you've seen by being up there, there's also now, we're sharing space. They've added a bunch of car chargers along that wall and the infrastructure for that. So if we wanted to add faux columns there at the end of these cantilevers, that could be done, but there might be some conflicts with some of the new infrastructure there. We didn't add them there because we felt the commission, it was such an obscure view, it wouldn't have added a lot to the project. Could it be added for visuals? Yes, but it's not where we wanted to spend money to add it. And again, with those added infrastructure complications. On the other end, on the west side there, quite simply, if we landed a column at that left corner there, it would impact a vehicular space, and we're trying not to lose any parking. And that's the same response to on the southeast end or the easternmost end. And again, we didn't add them there because from the public way, they're not visible from anywhere. So it would only be on the deck itself. And we didn't think it was important enough visually on the deck to add those and lose those parking spaces.
Okay, so I was going to have a follow-up question to that real fast. So just to confirm, the columns that we're looking at that are on the the top of the top column, very top of the page of the screen, that one is, you're saying it's really not visible from anywhere. And we had a view of it. We had a view looking down from the Victoria side of the Paseo there, looking up, and you could just barely see a hint of the beam along the top. So what your point is, you're not going to actually see that there are columns there, and that's why you're not. Is that correct? Is that true? I should say.
No, I don't want to say that they're not visible, but they're not visible from a prominent location, and they're at an obscure angle. We didn't think they added a lot to enhance. Placing those would really enhance things in a significant way. So of course, the commission is up for the commission, but we're giving you the reasons why we didn't place them.
All right, Commissioner Lembick.
I think that when we were up on the roof talking, I thought I was trying to explain that while we're doing this in steel and we have the ability to do much more than you ever would do it if it was wood beams, you would never find those kind of cantilevers in a traditional trellis structure. And I felt it was important that we respect the idea of what was traditional from the standpoint of columns and their supports and so on and so forth, even though we might not see it from the ground level. I think it's important that we not get ourselves wrapped up in this, well, we can't see it, therefore we don't do it right. And I'm concerned about that. And I think that these long cantilevers are not anywhere near traditional. And I don't know that we should encourage them in a steel structure. So those are my comments. The rest of the commission may or may not like that. Next question I have for you. What is your intention with regard to the finish on the Z purlins?
The Z purlins, I believe we're just going to have them painted the same color, correct? Yes, the same gray color they can be painted.
I would suggest that you save yourself a lot of money and ask this commission if those couldn't be galvanized, because the color is so similar to the color on the beams. And you can save all that money in not painting those Z members. You're probably really willing to put columns up.
That would be a great that'd be a great comment from the commission if they felt that would be helpful.
I have no problem those Z clips, those Z members being galvanized. That's me as one person. The other, well, I think that is probably the only questions I have. I have comments, but I'll let that go. But we're really pleased with how this was brought along by Mr. Lenny and Mr. DiVicente and the project client, as well as the Public Works Department. So thank you.
All right. Other questions?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Drury.
Yes, I just have a general question. This project is part of is it part of a mandatory energy program from the city of Santa Barbara? Is that correct?
Well, I don't know if that's the right terminology for it, but and staff can correct me or fine tune it, but it is part of a strategic plan of one sort or another to get solar, and this is decided that this was an optimal place for it, so that's why it's here and that's why it's in front of us.
Right.
And it has been part of our discussion that this is a tricky one because you basically have competing things, and we're trying to get the aesthetics and the general feel of it to work within the EPV, but you are also having this competing pressure from the solar side of things and from the energy goals of the city. That's
right. So it's part of sort of an overall city energy program.
Yeah, and yes, and also that it's in the same way that housing is a priority, but we still have to have EPV findings, and we still have to apply our rules.
All right, thank you.
Okay. All right. I had a quick question, and anyone else that has questions as well, but for the I-beams, if you can go to, this section right here, if you can zoom in bottom right. So the I-beam that we have here, the W10 girder. So was there thought and consideration for either making that? I know we've brought something like this up, but now that you're having the actual structured trellis playing out here, the I-beam being either a C channel of some sort or just welding a plate on the one side of it, so that it appears rather than as an I-beam, but just as almost like a tube steel rectangular. But you're only seeing from one side, so not wrapping the whole thing, but just looking at the one side that would be catching shadows from that trellis. Was there any discussion of doing that as a sort of boxing it in on one side?
Well, Anthony, the flanges on top at the bottom would probably just blend in, so you still have that horizontal piece there anyway. I am not sure that boxing it in would have any impact, because it would still look like a horizontal beam. And so anyway, I mean, again, the flanges are most likely, the flange at the bottom, of course, will be completely invisible. From a perspective point of view, until it clears one beam to the next. So, I am comfortable with the way it is right now. And it's a little more slender than I think we would have it if it was boxed in on one side and not the other.
I believe, and Mr. Chair, I believe that Bill Mahan and I were we accepted that structural element or elements because it's contemporary, whatever it is, and we felt it wasn't worthwhile to try to conceal steel, the steel elements. It was more important to try to maintain the rhythm of columns and the respect for shorter cantilevers, or so on and so forth. But the fact that there was a wide flange, it wasn't a big deal to us.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. If there's no other questions, let's go into comments.
I'll start off with comments. Yeah, I personally feel that the Z channels, Z members that support the solar panels could be galvanized because their color is so close to the color of the steel system. So I'm willing to accept that if that's what they want to do. I think that we want to make sure in any motion we make that there is no conduit that will be running on the exterior of the building. there is conduit that has been placed now on the interior walls of the garage level. And I think we should accept that as being reasonable as well. However, I believe the conduit on the interior of the parapet walls on the garage level should be painted out to match the wall. I don't know that we would want them to necessarily paint their control cabinets and their switchgear cabinets, so on and so forth. I think they can be a standard bondrized gray, but I think we should see the conduits inside be painted. I am not sure that the lights and the trim, the lighting fixture trim is what we want to see color-wise, as opposed to getting something which blends in more with the underside of the panels that are there that you're going to see. So those are my comments. I really feel that we should have fake columns on those long cantilevers. I think there are either 5 or 6 of them that I described before. Would really encourage that to happen.
All right, and actually, I forgot, I did have one more, or one two-part question about the panels. If we can jump to the, actually, if we can jump to the perspective from Anapamu, and it is that, let's see, try that one. Yeah, this is a good one. I wasn't sure if there was another one, but this will do. So I guess the question to the applicant is, one, above the stairs on the left, you can see that you can barely see the 2 pieces of the panels poking out that are still sawtooth. Was there, looking at, that one's a better one, actually. Yeah, there we go. This shot. So has there been any look at making those end panels flat, or those last couple panels flat from the ones from public use, so at least they read like the other one, like the rest of the ones that are visible here, rather than having the sawtooth? So that's the first part of the question to the applicant. Or any thoughts on it if you were to go flat with them?
Yeah, Chair Grumman, it's a question of, it's priorities and what's visible. So if it could be done, because we would handle it the same way as along Anapamu, where the 4x6s would just span from that first W10 back to the next one, and then we would pick up the Z purlins after that, if the commission felt strongly they wanted that visible. If they felt that section was visible enough, that it should also be handled the same way.
Okay. Thank you. And then the last part was, if you can go to the solar panel layout, question, the solar panel layout. Okay, so yeah, if you can zoom in a little bit there, Mr. Bolton, thank you. Okay, so when looking at this rooftop, and the thinking is looking at the troublesome portion, especially the most visible one that we've been talking about this whole time, and that there used to be 2, and now that you've eliminated it down to 1 main troublesome one, which is the Anapamu side. And I look at how you reworked it and be able to keep the same amount of panels, and it makes me wonder, is there a way of even taking, so if you zoom into the troublesome panels, Mr. Bolton, that's the trellis end portion, and if we count off how many sort of rows there are from the bottom left to the top right, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, basically 6 strips of solar panel that are all flat, right? And so my question becomes, and then you have the little trellis members popping out afterwards, the beams and the latias that's on top. My question is, what if you found, is there a way of finding another home for, say, 3 of those 6 rows? So that from the Anapamu side, you really see through the trellis openness at the beginning, and then it goes solid. But the strongest frontmost portion of it, obviously it's best to do the whole thing that way. But assuming you can't find a home for the other 3 rows, even just finding a home for those first 3 rows, I think would make your eye and the shadows read past and through it, and then it would kind of disappear into a solid after that. And looking at now if we zoom or scroll up to the Anacapa side of the building, it seems like it's so invisible right now. My question becomes, is there any more space even to cantilever out some of those beams and give some more, give a one row of panels all the way along that side that extends further, that gives you some of those panels, all or some of those panels back on the Anacapa side, which seems very much to not be in a danger of being seen, and it seems to be stopped on a common structural line, which makes sense. But what about extending that a little further and capturing the solar panels there? Because even that street itself is built in so much that you don't have the vantage point to really see them from any real angle. So has that been thought of in terms of a mix, or what are your thoughts on that as a potential solution to the Anapamu side?
Sure, Chair Grumbine. We really didn't cover this much with the ad hoc group, but I think you're seeing the pieces and parts, the levers that we've been pushing and pulling on. So yeah, I think if in general, if the commission understands now what it means on the Anapamu edge and even the Granada edge, did we pull back too far? If the commission is comfortable with cantilevering on either of those ends to pick up, you know what we're dealing with. It's just the Z purlins and the set of panels, which is probably about 6 feet just to get another row of panels in. Yes, if the commission would be comfortable with the W10s pushing out 6 feet in either direction, we could certainly get additional rows of solar there. If you felt strongly that we wanted to reduce, to shift panels around on the Anapamu side. So yeah, I would say we're comfortable with that. It is introducing some cantilevered elements, but maybe aesthetically it'd be acceptable going past the main kind of W18s there with some cantilevers. Yeah. It's
okay. Great. I just wanted to see what the read was on that, and any thoughts that you had on that. Okay. That's it. That was my question. So back to comments. Commissioner Lendick?
Yeah. Keep in mind, our goal, Landmark's goal, was to find a design of a support system that was in some way harmonious with the EPB standards. And we have no control over solar panels, and I appreciate the applicant willing to move panels around, so on and so forth. But I contend our goal really is to get a support system that is has some sympathy with, traditional design of trellises. I would hate to have create more new cantilevers and whatever that are not traditional, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I agree, and I do want to have that discussion as well with it, because I totally agree on your points of where the point load needs to be holding visually properly a cantilevering member. And I think could we go back to that detail, because I think you're absolutely right. I think that your goals were to get a visual structural system that makes sense, that's more EPB sensitive than what was being shown. And I think that this is very good and very close, and others might feel the same way as well. But so if we could zoom into the bottom one. And I think that this goes to our whole structural discussion. So you have a column holding the W18 beam, which is the main girder, right, or the main big structural beam. And then on top of that, at smaller spacing, basically, you have the W10 acting as the cross beam. And then, so those as acting as cross beams, the big girders land right on the column. That makes sense that it kind of wants to stop there or almost there. It could go a little bit over. If it was, heavy timber, going a little bit over would be fine too, but that's the general sort of formation. Then having your W10 girder act as your next level small beam. Those could cantilever a bit, but I totally agree with you in terms of how much that was cantilevering in the corners. Those are very problematic. Those are cantilevering way more than a heavy beam would ever cantilever. But they can cantilever a bit, and maybe they can cantilever, I don't know, some number, 6 feet or something, and still look reasonable. And then the little guys on top, the 4x6s and the 2x2s, or the 4x6s, let's say, those would want to cantilever a little bit less, right? Like 4 feet might be the max or something like that. And then the little Latias on top with no or very little cantilevering. So I agree. I think we do need to think of it as systems. But what I'm wondering is there a way of even using that system the cantilevering enough that we're not disobeying the rules, we're not breaking the rules, we're still staying within the proper beam and column rules, but we're maximizing it off the other end a little bit, where a little cantilever is actually okay and works with the structural system, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chair, I have another question.
All right, let's go back to questions.
Mr. Bolton, if we could go back to the last perspective view that we were looking at. So it appears that the bottoms of the solar panels are dark. Do we know that they are? What color is the bottom of them?
Chair Grumbine, Vice Chair House, they are dark. Yes, it's. I have any photos in the package to show you, but yes, they're a dark color solar panel, typical.
Okay, so they're not a bright shiny aluminum on the bottom side or anything.
No.
Okay, that's good to know. That's my question.
All right, back to discussion, comments.
Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to make some comments.
Sure.
I really want to see this get approved, and this is probably the biggest increment of improvement that we've seen in our multiple hearings, but it's still, to me, just an increment, and I was hoping for more of a wholesale improvement. My issues, well, first of all, let me say that what you've done on the Granada Paseo side is great, and the Victoria side of the structure, I am just fine with that. It is a solar panel supporting structure, and my main concern has always been the view from the public right of way, and people are not going to be looking up and having a problem with it in a back alley. So I don't have a problem with that. And as far as painting or not painting the Z channels, I think any that are visible from the street should be painted, but in the large field of the structure up on top of this building, I don't have a concern about that. Likewise, the lights, if they're not visible from any vantage point, then I have less of a problem with that. And I also have no problem with large steel cantilevers, because I don't think that you'd notice them unless you were walking around in the alley trying to get a vantage point where you could see them and really scrutinizing them. And from up on top of the parking deck, I don't really know who cares. All I'm concerned about is the street frontage. So my issues with what you're presenting here today are, I feel that the 4x6s at 32 inches on center and 2x2 Latias, 3 rows of them, look like toothpicks up there. And I just don't feel they're in the proper proportion and scale to this building. And I don't know what the cost differential would be, but I would like to see something more on the order of 6x8s at 4 feet on center, with something on the order of a 4-foot cantilever, and have those Latias be 3x3 or 4x4, and the spacing relative to one another is fine as it is right now, so proportionally could be expanded if they were larger. But I think it's going to be much more successful in drawing your attention to the shadow pattern that it casts. And I think right now you'd look up there and it just look like little strips of spaghetti or something. So also, I am not really comfortable with that color of gray. I certainly appreciate the rationale behind it. And I'm not advocating that it go back to the dark color that was proposed before. But right now you have a contrast between the bottom of the solar panels and this gray. And to me, the gray is the color of oxidized galvanizing, which seems to accentuate it's a big steel structure. So I would rather see something that's a little darker and a little browner. And I think that that would be a good compromise solution. I think that pretty much sums it up. I really appreciate the comments of Chair Grumbine that it does look like from studying the roof layout, the Anacapa side, the outer W18, I think it's the W18, is half a panel depth outside the field. And so it almost seems like who would notice if there was another row of panels there? Short of having new drawings, I don't know what the impact would be on the Granada Paseo side, but I would certainly support looking into additional row of panels on the Anacapa side and reducing the impact of that. I think we're calling it the southwest corner, the one furthest from the intersection. It's not as obtrusive as that front row of panels where we've put the trellis, but it would certainly be a big improvement to move some panels from there and put them along Anacapa Street. So I think that's all the comments I have. Oh, I did want to say that, the Planning Commission had to make findings that this was exemplary, and some of the members who did not vote for it did not find it exemplary. And I do not find it exemplary right now. And I really want to get this approved, but I would have a hard time voting for it as it's presented today.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair House. Other comments?
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner House, or sorry, Commissioner Drury?
Yes, I agree with Commissioner House's comments. I was hoping for a little bit more improvement on that Anapamu view. So if we can look at that from the street photograph, it's difficult to determine exactly how many. If you move 3 panels back, the perspective, yeah, that one's a good one. If you move 3 panels and put them somewhere else, it would, I think, that the array would go behind that tower in the middle, and it would be a good deal of diminishment in terms of the visual impact of that array. And I think that should be explored.
Commissioner
Am I
Drury,
right?
just to that point, yeah, so I think you can see the sliver of blue, just a little peeking out at the very top of the parapet wall. You can see a little bit of blue. That's
yes.
So half, basically, that's all 6 panels that we're seeing. So the 3 panels, imagine halfway down, halfway back.
So that would be just about hitting the crown of that particular tower in the middle of that building. I think that is what we're after ultimately is to diminish the impact visually of that array on Anapamu Street, and it's really kind of an integral part of El Pueblo Viejo in terms of the architecture surrounding that particular building, the courthouse, the library, the art museum, and I think that would be explored, and I think it would find a pretty happy commission if that was done. Otherwise, I think that the work that the ad hoc committee did and the direction it's going, I'm all for it. I think that Commissioner House is correct about the color. I think there'd be reflections also bouncing off of any sun surface. I would like to see it a darker, maybe a dark gray brown or something, to not have those stripes of the array showing through the beams. So I think I'm being consistent. I echo Commissioner House's opinions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Other commissioners want to weigh in?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Vice Chair House.
I just want to acknowledge that the fact that we're having virtual meetings and we're not able to use our pointers to point at something on the drawings is really making this confusing. And in some ways, I think Commissioner Drury and I are talking about 2 different things. So You know, I would just say that on the Anapamu frontage, I'm not talking about those columns moving back. I'm not talking about rows counting from Anapamu going back towards Victoria being removed. And I wasn't even sure what you were talking about. I was assuming it was the ones that are visible at the top of the stairs over there. But, you know, I just want to acknowledge there's confusion about what we're talking about because of the nature of these virtual meetings.
Well, this is true, Commissioner House. Mr. Chair, it is my understanding from what you were asking is that 3 rows of the array would be moved from that elevation. Is that correct? And put somewhere else?
That's an idea I was thinking of with a possibility. If they could move those solar panels 3, or I mean,
I would. That's what I thought Commissioner House was talking about, but that's what I'm talking about, and I would support that idea very much. Thank you,
Mr. Chair.
Okay.
I would say I would support that as well, but I assume that it's an issue of where the columns can be supported, and that moving them back is the major issue.
And let's just, and I was actually going to bring that up as a question, but just to confirm, it's my understanding structurally that we can see from here the big, you know, whatever it is, W18 girder, or not girder, what they're calling it, whatever it is, beam that comes. There's 2 of them you can see in this picture. One of them is just above that tower element. Oh yeah, there's that one right there, and then there's those 2. And I'm assuming that they're doing that because those are the 2 main structural elements that have to run the whole span to clear everything and then land on the outside. And so that's why they need to get all the way to where they are. And then everything else is kind of built off of those 2 in terms of the structure for this whole panel array. Otherwise, we could, you know, suggest they move this whole panel array of 6 rows somewhere else. And but they still need those 2 giant girders coming and landing on a column. So it looked kind of dopey just kind of coming out there. So that's what I'm assuming the whole structural system is based on. So then one idea would be still leave the structural system the way it is, because that's the structural system just to get the whole thing to work across the roof. And then, but the solar panels in this particular area, try to find a home for them somewhere else as much as possible. That's where I was kind of going to go with my comment, was to look at either taking 3 rows or taking all 6 if they can find another home for them on the side of the building that's less impactful, and then use this as the most important frontage. Because also, right, there's a plaza from the library that one day will be finished. One of these years or decades will be finished, and then this will also be a very public view from there as well.
Exactly.
And Anacapa, I'm not so worried about, because it's already such a tall, high canyon of a view that you really, you probably wouldn't notice it even if the trellis came very close to the edge. So anyway. Okay, so other comments, and I agree that we're really riding the struggle bus here to try to get point to things and everything else. It's not a nice way of reviewing things. So any other additional comments? Obviously, maybe we can have a discussion about this, and there's obviously going to need to be made a motion. It seems like, as a whole, the structural system, at least this newly revised beams and cross beams and little trellis members and Latias, those are all kind of, everyone seems to be much more in supportive of this as its basic language, right? Now that, don't disagree with me if you don't agree, let me know now, but it's seeming like most of the conversation has been in agreement with this general new structuring. And if that's the case, that's good. That's a big step in the right direction. And then it starts to become a question of using that structural language, and some of the subtleties of it, as Commissioner Lendick pointed out, is not having overly cantilevered beams that have no visual support. In this case, we see the exact case of it right here, where we have on the corner, the very, very corner post, is visually holding, even though it's not structural, that's my guess, but visually holding that W10 that's going across the minor beam, not the major beam that's going back, that's the minor beam, but it's at least visually holding it and giving some. And it's also, they did another false column in between the two girders, the two big massive W18s, and that are also false, but they give a good visual breakup and visually hold the beam. So I think that language is right, and I think the question becomes Commissioner Lenvik wanting it to be more consistent throughout, others not necessarily as stuck with it on areas you can't see from the public ground view. And I would say I would land somewhere in the middle there as well. I do think they should be right, but the areas I'm least concerned about are the ones that you can't see from anywhere in the public realm, at least not in a real obvious way. So the question becomes, with this language going and with this general design going, the obvious question is there enough support and people being comfortable to give either project design approval now or to push it on for another round to come back to us with hopefully some good directives for them to either try or tweak. The other factor, and this might just be a discussion method, is are we close enough that we would, because obviously project design approval is a big step. Are we close enough to give project design approval with also knowing that we might have to flex things a little bit, and that would be part of it. But obviously we can't flex things too much because they have to still fit within the criteria and we have to be able to make the findings. So, any thoughts on that?
Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton.
If I may, I'd just like to remind the commission that at this point in the process, it might make sense to grant project design approval if the commission feels that the project size, bulk, scale, overall presence is appropriate, and then the final details can be worked out at final approval. I just wanted to remind you of that for our guidelines.
Mm-hmm. And it seems to me, along that line, it seems to me this is sort of a gray area of where things might fall, because we might want them to push more solar panels back, and they might try it out in a different area of the roof, push it a row one way or the other, and that might be a minor mass bulk scale adjustment, or if it's done enough, it might be more of a major one. So that also depends on what people's comfort level in that gray area is, because it's pretty clearly not a total, it might slightly affect the mass bulk and scale, but some might consider it more of a major effect of mass bulk and scale.
Mr. Chair.
To shift. Yes, Vice Chair House.
All things on balance, I don't personally feel comfortable giving it a PDA for something that I don't think is there yet in the basic design, and it's not just a matter of details. However, considering the whatever it's called, the timeline that constrains the approval process, I could consider it, but I would like to hear from the applicant, both Ms. Parenteau and the architects, if they're willing to consider the comments we've made. If those are non-starters again, then I can't give this a PDA. And, if we give it a PDA, I would like to see it return in progress, not just come back for a final approval and this is all we're going to do. So, I would like to keep working on it, but I would like to give them what they need so they can get going on at least the bulk of the engineering, et cetera, et cetera. So there must be a compromise solution here somewhere, hopefully.
All right, to the applicant, I think that's kind of a question. So to the applicant, what are your thoughts on what Vice Chair House said, and whether that in progress, with still some flexing happening, is a doable thing? And I'm not seeing the applicant come on.
Hi, Commissioner. Oh, sorry. Let me fix my webcam really quickly. Okay. Hi, everybody. Well, to be sure, we're a little bit disappointed. We did think that this would go a little bit differently today. We were feeling very confident after our meetings with Commissioners Lenvick and Mahan. And honestly, we're struggling to feel like we're still moving forward each time when we come back and there's more revisions. You know, we feel like we've presented a very, very attractive solar array for the downtown corridor. I apologize if you don't agree. But we really do need to keep moving this forward. We're nearing 2 years in this process now, and we're really trying. I hope you understand that we are really trying, and we're trying to meet your requests, and it's just disappointing that you want us to come back again.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion. If I may.
All right.
I would like to make a motion for project design approval with the following conditions. One, that columns, either structural or fall, be placed at the end of the 6 large cantilever beams as discussed. 2, that the applicant be allowed to use galvanized Z channels for the solar panel array supports. 3, that all conduit on the interior walls, parapets, and columns on the upper level be painted to match either the walls or the columns. Next number, that the direction of the color of the structural steel elements is not finally approved, although we prefer the direction that is currently proposed to be preferable to a dark color. That all lights be concealed or painted out in the upper structure. That the girders, beams, latias, and other structural elements have end caps on all of them, steel end caps. That the architect is encouraged, next time, the architect is encouraged to, within the framework of the trellis structure, to explore alternates which might create less impact on the Anapamu Street frontage and probably enable them to expand slightly on the Anapamu Street frontage within the structural framework.
Anacapa?
Anacapa, what is, yeah, Anacapa. And finally, that the architect come back with in-progress drawings showing greater detail and exploring the alternatives we have suggested they look at from the standpoint of panel layout. And I'll be prepared to make
that much.
Thank you. I'll be prepared to make the findings if you'll bring them up on the screen.
Before you do that, could I add, or could I ask for a, if you would add to that the laying of flat of the last several panels, any panels visible from Anapamu, laying flat instead of the ones along the Granada Theater. The ones that you can see are on angle from that corner shot. And it would just be whatever is visual from the street that you could, so you don't see angled panels popping up.
All right, I will add that as a look at the at alternative layouts, that they look at that as well.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
All right. And then before you go into the whole thing, if you're okay with making those, that sounds good. I think we should go under discussion first before we get into all of that. before you make all those things. So under discussion, any other discussion about the motion?
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Uli.
First, I'd like to express my appreciation to both Commissioners Mahan and Limvick for meeting with the applicant and working out these details, because I think that was important and key. Second, the aesthetics of this particular very challenging project, in my opinion, have come quite a ways from the first time that we saw it. And third, we're never going to make a solar array look as beautiful as a wonderfully proportioned trellis that we see in the city that is acceptable to the guidelines. It will never happen because the geometry of solar panels doesn't lend itself to this. And so I think this project is supportable for a PDA, because I think the common man would not know the difference walking down the street of whether this was steel, wood, or otherwise. It would just look like a nice trellis on top of a building that we see all over town. So I think it's made a long way, and I can support a PDA and fine.
Mr. Chair, to the commission.
Other discussion, Mr. Hamilton?
We are getting a little ahead. There is still a motion on the table without a second.
No, the motion was by Lemon, second was by Commissioner Uli. Sorry.
Mr. Hamilton, I made the second.
The findings for, let's see, the project compatibility findings and tree removal findings were not yet made. So that's.
Mr. Limvick's going to do that.
For discussion? Okay. All right. I was trying to have discussion before, but you're saying that's out of order, to let him do the whole thing first before we have discussion. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry. That's my
okay.
bad. All right. Commissioner Limvick.
Earlier.
Right. We find that the design of the support structure for solar arrays is consistent with the intent of the design guidelines to the location within the city and on the roof of the building. 2, do I have to make findings on all of these, Mr. Hamilton?
Yes, Commissioner Limvick.
1 out of 8.
In order to approve the project, all the project compatibility findings will need to be met, and also the tree removal findings, which we will pull up after the project compatibility.
The solar array trellis structure is compatible with the architectural character, which is appropriate to this area of Santa Barbara. Next.
Did you hit the mass bulk scale, the number 3?
Yeah, Commissioner Limvick, I think you skipped number 3.
My screen doesn't pick up that. I don't have that on my screen. And let me move around the people's faces. Okay. 3. The mass scale, the size, mass, bulk, height, and scale of the trellis structure is appropriate for its location on the building and in this neighborhood. 4, the design of the trellis structure supporting the solar array is appropriately sensitive to the adjacent landmarks and other designated historic resources in the area. 5, the public views of the ocean and mountains is not compromised by the construction of the trellis structure. 6, the project does not have any landscaping on the roof, period.
Well, not anymore.
Not anymore.
You guys make those findings first.
Tree removal findings.
And Commissioner Wendler?
B, the reasonable and practical development of the rooftop on which trees are located requires the removal of those trees, period.
Okay, and if that's the only applicable finding, then I think that concludes the findings, unless there's another finding on the next slide that you think applies.
Do you want to go to the last slide just to make sure?
The one I quoted is adequate.
All right, and then Commissioner Uli will need to accept those changes to the motion.
With that. All right. We got the maker of the motion and the seconder. Now we can go under discussion. Under discussion, Commissioner Edmonds.
Could you go back to the findings just now, not the tree removal, but the other 2 pages for me? Thank you. You know, I really would like to approve this project. I'm conflicted because I agree with the comments made by Commissioner House, Vice Chair House. But I also understand that this is a project that really, for the city of Santa Barbara and the environment, you know, that this is a very important project. However, when I listen to and I read these findings, I don't believe that it's compatible with the character of the neighborhood. And if you go on to the next page for me. And I don't think it's sensitive to the adjacent landmarks and historic resources. It would be sensitive if we shrunk, not we, but if the project was shrunk so that we did not see the solar panels, then I believe it would be sensitive. And so based on having, I thought I was going to vote to approve it, the PDA, but now that I've seen these and reviewed them, I don't think I can. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Uli.
My comment about its sensitivity to adjacent landmarks, to the degree that anything on the top deck of the Granada building can still be seen from the clock tower observation deck, even if it is a tree in a box in the middle of the deck, will never be 100% because you see everything on the roof. I believe that its impact is much greater understood from the street level, where 99.2% of the people are going to see it from. I don't believe that you can see it from the ground of the archway from the courthouse. And if you did, it's a glimpse or a two because it's so well shielded. So I can support the fact that it doesn't have a great deal of impact on historic resources that surround it. The Granada building is also a historic resource, and except for the top floors of the building, they can't see it either. The administration building, county administration building, is not a historic resource, so there's no impact there. The library is a historic resource, but there are no vantage points from the library from which you can look out a window and see this. So I believe that the impact to historic resources surrounding the property is minimal at best.
Just to clarify, my thinking, I wasn't thinking from the clock tower. I was actually thinking of standing on the grounds of the library and looking across the street.
Yeah, and along those lines, to sort of add to that conversation, I agree in general with Commissioner Uli's assessment, where it's not really I mean, it's impacting your view from the street. Yeah, that's your view. It's not impacting the actual historic resource of the library. I wouldn't think that. I don't think it's affecting historic resources because it's not like it's right up against it and it's offensive because it's so conflicting with the historic resource or crowding it in some way. So I agree with that. I still am having trouble finding I think it's on its way to being there and close, but to having it compatible with the language of EPV, which is the previous finding that you had brought up, Commissioner Edmonds, as a thing that has to be. And I think that was where my comment of trying to find a way of putting a plate or something on the I-beam. I think I-beams read as I-beams very strongly. And I think the shadow lines that are going to be cast from the trellis are going to give it away even more as an I-beam. And yes, I understand from a general aesthetic point of view, it's not the end of the world to have this. I mean, you can see them on the old railroad bridges and things like that, where you have this massive I-beams. But you also have rivets and other details that make them more traditional and fit better with sort of the wrought iron feel of EPV. So in my mind, that's the last key piece that's still not quite there. And I'm hoping that I can get there with the next set of review, but it's also a hard finding to agree with at this point because it's almost there in my mind, but it's not quite there. It doesn't quite have that sensitivity yet. It's a lot more sensitive than it was last time we saw it, for sure. And so that's a good thing, but I am on the border there, and I'm hopeful that it can get there with the next review, but I'm not sure about that as well. So anyway,
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, Commissioner
Chair, virtually every rental project that we see today, downtown, as well as other locations, have rooftop recreation areas, trellises, water features, fireplaces, you name it. And we don't seem to have a problem with that in the EPV. As opposed
I
to
agree.
having,
That
so
wasn't what I was saying. I'm talking about the detail of it.
we are simply at a point, as a society or whatever, where we've got to accept the fact that we are going to have, solar panels, and we're going to have, whatever else, and we've got to integrate those as easily and as sensitively as we can into our architecture. And I think we're doing.
I agree with all those things. My point is, it's not quite, the trellis isn't quite there in my mind. I'm hoping it can get there, but it's not quite there in terms of the language of EPB, and I'm hoping it can get there. So,
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Drury.
Yeah, to Commissioner Lembeck's last comment, I think this is why this project is so important because it's going to become a benchmark or a precedent, and I think we need to get it right all the way through. And I would probably not be able to support it as presented.
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair House.
I'm not trying to influence anybody's vote, but rather than state my reasons for voting against it after we take the vote, I guess it might be useful for me to say that if I had heard from the applicant that they were willing to consider the suggestions made today and keep working on it and return in progress, I probably would have voted for the PDA. But what I hear is, no, we were disappointed that you didn't approve it today and just accept what we've done, and that, no, we're not going to do anything more. And I can't accept that because I don't think it's there. And it has nothing to do with accepting solar panels. Right now, the solar panels are not the issue. It's just that that trellis is just not credible to me. I mean, it just needs work on proportions, and it could be so much better. I really don't see why this is so difficult. It's not that difficult to make this look more trellis-like.
Okay, now we don't normally do this, but and we are going late on time, and those are our last item. So I do want to keep things moving, but and maybe I wasn't necessarily quite hearing that from the applicant as well. So maybe we'll let the applicant come on one more time and maybe make clear what they're hearing and what their thoughts and feelings are, because obviously there are commissioners on the fence and could go either way with it. And from what you've heard from our discussion today, what your thoughts are and where you could push this design or keep pushing this design as you have been.
Chair Grumbine, fellow commissioners, again, thank you, everyone. By the end of this, I would like a little bit better concise comments from the commission. We've got a lot of different opinions about things, so some consensus would be helpful. But overall, yes, the ad hoc process was extremely helpful. We expected that there would be additional dialogue to it. The suggestions that Vice Chair Howes made are not deal stoppers, as the previous comments lowering it to the deck and other things we've covered and are no longer in the discussion now. That's great. What the comments we've received from the commission today are very workable. The proportions of the rafters can be looked at, as well as the latios. For us, that's final detailing stuff, and absolutely we're open to that. So yes, we are open to that, including looking at a potential where it makes sense for additional column locations. So the applicant team, what the feedback we've gotten from the commissioners is all very workable. What we would like some clarification on, and this goes to the finer points of Mr. Lenvig's motion, is, because he created the motion and maybe the whole commission isn't fully on board with some of the direction of it. So getting some clarification there on, if there's other areas of the roof that are now structure that are no longer visible that could be expanded, some of the cantilevering we talked about of the W10s in particular, to allow more solar, then we can that gives us an additional lever to enhance the most public views. So getting a little more consensus on that would be helpful to us, but in general, we think the comments that have been made are workable, certainly, and to us, they're things that can be worked out at either an in-progress or a final level review.
Yes, I also agree. I think the comments that were suggested were very good comments. We're not opposed to it, particularly the ones that Mr. Lenvig suggested and Mr. Mahan at the side. I think they were excellent suggestions, and I'm personally very happy with it. I must say, though, the color, having it brown as we did before, was not working very well in actuality. I think the suggestion by Mr. Mahan and Mr. Lenvig works a lot better from my point of view. But the rest of it, I think there were good comments today, good suggestions, and we're not against it. And just to clarify it altogether.
Okay. Okay, thank you. So Commissioner Uli?
I got to click the unmute button. Thank you. To the point that the applicant raised about my particular view about adding solar panels either to the Granada side or the Anacapa side, I'm okay with that. I think it's pulled back sufficiently enough that one panel row on either side is not going to increase that visual impact much. I think on the Anacapa side, you might get 40 panels. So 40 panels is enough to accomplish what the chair was suggesting on the view that we see now. Then I say that, okay, that seems like an easy swap. You know, if playing around with the proportions of the rafters and the smaller elements on top can accomplish what Vice Chair House is after, then, you know, and that's a fairly straightforward thing to do, then I think that makes sense. And to the color, you know, it would seem to me dark is not working, didn't work. So something maybe, you know, a tad more brown than what we see might be sufficient to bring it to the center.
And let me just, the only thing I actually really want to comment is on the color on this discussion, because I think that there's probably a better mechanism than looking at a computer rendering for color. And I think it might take like having a sample of the solar panel and getting a couple different colors and getting commissioners to see it in person or whatever. There might be more of that. I think that would help with finessing it than working it out in these color renderings. And obviously that's also something that would come with final. So if we want to give some direction on that, that's no problem. We can kind of give it. We can give it now or we can give it later. But I think it would be something that would be wise to not try to solve in one shot, but maybe try to solve in person with multiple color possibilities and various commissioners looking at it for to weigh in on what they really think is how it will actually look with that particular solar panel underside.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, so maybe we can just leave that color as that discussion, that further discussion down the road, which I think Commissioner Lenvik's motion leaves that open for that. So I think that we're still, the color is still TBD, and there might be better ways to work it out than this. Okay, so any more discussion, and then otherwise we'll go to a vote to see
Mr. Chair.
what happens. Vice Chair House.
I don't mean to be difficult, but the architect team takes direction from the applicant, and I would need to hear from the applicant that yes, the architectural team has direction from the applicant to explore these things that we've been discussing.
Thank you, Commissioner House. Thank you, Chair Carmine. I appreciate the opportunity to come back on. And yes, if my architect team thinks we can get these things done, then I am in full support. As you know, we've been trying to get to yes from day one with you all, and so I'm completely on board. But you know, do just want to keep the project moving forward, so keeping that front of mind for you all.
Thank you for that.
All right, Vice Chair House. Anything else or anything else before we go to vote? All right, in that case, let's have a roll call vote.
All right. Commissioners, I'll go ahead and start. Commissioner Drury.
Yes.
Commissioner Edmonds.
Oh, sorry, helicopter overhead. No.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Lenvik.
Yes.
Commissioner Mahan. Commissioner Mahan.
Commissioner Mahan is not on the webinar anymore.
Okay, thank you. I'll move on to Commissioner Uli.
Yes.
Vice Chair House.
Reluctantly, yes.
And Chair Grumbine.
No.
All right, thank you. The motion carries.
All right, and Commissioner Edmonds, can you state for the record why you were opposed?
Sorry. I don't believe we meet the criteria of being sensitive to the character of the neighborhood. As I said, I really wanted to vote for this, but I really don't believe it fits with the character of the neighborhood. And yet I really believe in solar panels, so it's very conflicting. I do think that based on the comments Commissioner Lenbeck made about the other things that we approved, and I totally agree with those comments, but I do think that we need to look at maybe bringing the standards of EPV up to the 2021 problems that we're facing.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Edmonds. And I would say the reverse. We just need to bring our problems to the EPV. My reason for saying no was just that I thought it was very close, but not quite there. And just to be consistent for myself, it wasn't. I could see it's getting there in the next round, but I don't know how the massing might change, and I'm not quite convinced. And I understand the rush, so it was reluctant no, but it didn't seem to be quite there for me. So I'm hoping it will be there for next time, and I think it probably will, knowing the applicant team. So I'm hopeful it will. So,
Mr.
all right.
Chair.
Commissioner
Mr.
Drury?
Chair, in the motion, there was no mention of when they're coming back, and I think 2 weeks is what we need to have. Is that correct?
So it has project design approval, Mr. Hamilton. In terms of the motion of when to come back, do we need to put anything on it, or is it is that an option?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commissioners. Since the project received project design approval today, the same Permit Streamlining Act timeline has been met, so you can continue it indefinitely, or if the applicant thinks they can get it back on a specific timeline, then we can continue it to a date certain. But
and actually, quick question. So it was discussed, but it wasn't officially put into the motion. Well, actually, maybe it was. Was it put into the motion to return in progress? I can't remember whether it was that was actually part of the motion or not to return.
I think it was.
I believe that was part. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good. So that at least says that was to return in progress. So then the question is now a time to add of when to come back, or to ask the applicant when they want to come back, or is it just leave it open and or have we already left it open? Is it already has that ship already sailed?
The HLC agendas are fairly flexible right now, so it's up to the commission and the applicant when they think they can come back. I think it could be an indefinite continuance, and we can work with the applicant team to get them back on when they're ready.
All right. So to the applicant then, does that work for you, or does that make the most sense, or is there something else that you would prefer?
Chair Grumbine, an indefinite continuance sounds great. There's a lot of moving parts on our end that we want to get dialed in and coordinated. And it's potential we may want to continue our ad hoc dialogue as well, because we found it helpful.
Okay. Sounds good.
With regard to the ad hoc dialogue, I'm out of town then.
He didn't tell you when.
Escaping.
You didn't specify when, so no, you're on the hook. You and Commissioner Mahan, you're the selected volunteer.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Vice Chair House.
I would volunteer to assist if that's of any help.
Okay, great, thank you. As long as we keep under our Brown Act 4 or under Brown Act 5, that would be great.
I will tell no one.
All right, Commissioner Uli.
Does it need an additional motion to continue with an indefinite continuance?
Mr. Hamilton? I don't believe it does, but just Mr. Hamilton.
I'd like to check with Ms. Ternovskaya to confirm, but I believe there was no specific date specified.
Right, that's correct.
So it's just assumed indefinite then?
Yes.
All right, very good.
And but there was specified for it to be an in-progress review.
I did hear that as part of the motion. Ms. Tarnowska, is the in-progress review one of the comments in the motion?
Yes, it should be.
Let me check. So I have project design approval and continue the project indefinitely back to the full commission with conditions and the project compatibility analysis criteria met. But I don't have anything here regarding an in progress review. Or actually,
so
I have architect shall come back with in progress drawings showing greater detail and exploring alternate suggestions.
That's
Great,
it.
perfect. That's what I thought. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. So it's in the motion. All right, is there anything else? Yeah, okay, there's a 10-day appeal period to city council. So this motion is, this decision is appealable to city council within 10 days. And then to the applicant, I'm assuming that we gave you a lot, and I think that there are differing opinions. So I know that you'll be, rewatching this and making sure that you kind of understand the various viewpoints, because I think there's some commissions that certain things are more important and others are maybe not as important. And as well, I think it would be good to work with a volunteer, unvolunteer the subcommittee, the ad hoc to help you out, those who are willing and able. So, all right, because this is an important public project, and it does have implications for future solar projects, at least we're trying to get this to work in design. So, all right. So with that, I think we are done with this item. So we are adjourned. Have a great day, everyone.